Welcome to Behavioral Challenges and How to Solve Them. Throughout this webinar, we'll be talking about how to prevent behavior issues, hopefully from ever rearing their heads in the first place, but also how to prevent escalation or reactions within your behavior challenges, how to manage those issues, and ultimately the different paths and the different elements you want to consider when you're seeking a resolution to those behaviors. A little bit about me first. My name is Liz Cummins. I am a CPDT KA and also a force-free certified professional. That means that I have had knowledge assessed by the Certification Council for Professional Dog Trainers, and I have taken courses specifically geared towards fear, anxiety, and stress, and being able to approach them in a way that minimizes fear, minimizes anxiety on the dog's part. I also own Like Magic Dog Training and have been providing services with Like Magic for the last 5 or so years, almost 6 years. I am a human mom to my kids, Ryan and Cassidy, and I'm a pet mom to Mouse, Fig, and Riz, the dogs, as well as Karma and Soot Sprite, the cats, and Loki, Basil, and Gorgug, the assorted reptiles in the house. You'll see a whole lot of Mouse and Fig throughout this video, as well as some friends, German Shepherds, and some client dogs. But Mouse and Fig are kind of my go-to when I'm looking for pictures of anything. Fig is my 4-year-old, currently German Shepherd dog, and Mouse is a 13-year-old American Pit Bull Terrier, and my introduction to behavioral learning, and my introduction to reactivity, and my introduction to dog training in general. So first I want to talk a little bit about where these behaviors come from. Where do behavior challenges come from? And what do I mean when I'm talking about behavior challenges? And ultimately, they come from dogs having big emotions. Generally, there are emotions that are well within normal frame of emotions for dogs to have, for humans to have. But generally, the ones we'd consider outside the proportionate range for the stimuli, for what's taking place, we would consider a behavioral challenge. And then also something that adversely affects their lives or their safety or their security. Something that isn't a reaction or degree of reaction or intensity of reaction that just simply doesn't serve them, is another piece that I would consider a behavioral challenge. And sometimes that behavioral challenge is something that in a different setting would not affect their lives adversely. But because of the lives that we ask our pet dogs to live, they're asked to deal with a whole lot. They're asked to live in a human world that isn't always geared directly to them. And that can make those big emotions a challenge in the household, in the lifestyle, in the world that they're in. So looking at that, you can look at fear and defensive aggression. And some of these are very general terms and have absolutely kind of cross over with one another. But defensive aggression, meaning aggression due to insecurity, due to fear, due to worry. And that you'll see often from a dog who maybe starts out fearful and then, if pressed, will become aggressive. But you'll also see offensive aggression, dogs who are proactively aggressive. And in both cases, defensive and offensive aggression can come from a place of fear, but they can also come from a lot of other different emotions. Including resource guarding, which is also stemming from some insecurity, some feeling that they need to defend the resources, which might be space, might be food, might be toys, might be people that they have in their possession. You can see leash or barrier reactivity or aggression. That's the dog that is completely fine with other dogs or with people when they're off leash or outside of the fence, but behind a fence or on leash, they become reactive. Very often that is stemming from either frustration that they cannot reach that stimulus, that person or that dog or that other animal, or it comes from insecurity of they are very well aware that they are restricted in their movements. And that restriction, that lack of feeling of freedom is what makes them reactive, and it's what causes them to react aggressively or defensively. You can also have inter-household aggression, and specifically same-sex aggression. Same-sex aggression is about the competition for resources, the resource being members of the opposite sex. Inter-household aggression can be a part and parcel of same-sex aggression, or you can have inter-household aggression with dogs of different sexes. But In both cases, these are about these particular dogs, or this particular type of dog, or this particular sex of dog. You can also have predatory aggression, dogs who are specifically aggressive towards small dogs or towards small animals, because they see them as prey, rather than necessarily it be about a competition for resources or a reaction out of fear. You'll also see handling intolerance as a function of behavioral challenges. Dogs who don't want to be grabbed, can't be reached for, can't be picked up, for whom husbandry or vet care is a special challenge. And then lastly, you have separation or confinement distress. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, this is probably the least focus that I personally work on with my clients, just because it's not my area of specialty, but wanted to include it in this because some of the concepts also apply to separation or confinement distress, up to and including this is coming from insecurity, this is coming from fear, this is coming from emotions that are disproportionate to the situation that they find themselves in. So then we come to the canine ladder of aggression, and these are behaviors that you are likely to see dogs move through as as that aggressive intention becomes more intense, as behavior becomes more intense, as a situation that they're uncomfortable with progresses. And what you'll see generally is that those behaviors move from displacement, move from a desire for de-escalation, for avoiding the fight, avoiding a confrontation, towards engaging in the confrontation usually in order to repulse the aggressor, or what's perceived to be the aggressor, what's perceived to be the danger in that situation. So this is absolutely not my creation. You'll find versions of this ladder all over the internet. I particularly like this one, and the behaviors that it specifically calls out, going from very small behaviors like yawning, lip licking, blinking. I'd also include in that other displacement behaviors like sniffing or going back repeatedly to a water bowl or to a food bowl, behaviors that are out of place in that situation, but that the dog is doing essentially as a nervous fidget, just like tucking your hair behind your ears, even if your hair is already behind your ears. It's a nervous behavior that is meant to expend energy and to de-escalate a situation. And they'll progress through this ladder. Generally, most dogs will progress through just about every single one of these steps, often multiple times, up to that growling, snapping, and biting, and those behaviors that we maybe more often see as aggressive behaviors. But steps can be skipped. Steps can be moved past very quickly. Steps can be kind of stuck on. Some dogs won't go through this whole ladder, and that can be for a variety of reasons. We'll kind of come back to it a little bit, but generally speaking, you're looking at reasons that have to do with that dog's internal learning history, their current stress level, and how they're currently feeling. As well as just what they've learned that they will be paid attention to, as well as their genetics, as well as a whole host of other things that can play into the intensity of that stimuli, can play into how quickly a dog moves through that ladder or what steps they skip. So what we want to look at is kind of what the best intervention is depending on that intensity as we progress through that ladder. So I want to talk a little bit about how those behaviors manifest in everyday life. So in one reaction from a dog, you might have what I consider kind of forward or proactive stress responses, meaning they are more ready to engage than they are to back off. So these are dogs that might blow past some of those early steps on the ladder. They might blow past some of these yawning, lip licking, turning their head away, all these green appeasement steps, and they might go directly into a more forward and proactive stress response. So in this, you might be looking at all aspects of their body language. So body language for a forward, for a proactive, for an engaged response, you're going to look at forward body language. So that might mean their entire body leans forward. That'll mean that their muscles get tense, that their legs get stiff. Their tail often will be fully raised, stiff, or wagging very, very fast at the top, at the little tip of their tail. In this picture, you can see this is Mouse, right after she heard a dog bark, or dogs get into a scuffle in a dog park that she can't see, but she can for sure hear. You can see her whole face is very tense and very forward. Her eyes go very round and get dilated. Her ears are pricked up. Her brow is furrowed. You can see she's brindle, so she's got a little bit of stripiness on her forehead anyway. But you can see that her forehead is wrinkled. You can see along her neck, you can see all the muscles are tensed up. Her body is pulled tight and forward. And I especially want to capture her muzzle here. Her mouth is not relaxed. This is actually from a different picture. I took two pictures moments apart, and you can see her go from relaxed to very tense. And this mouth is not relaxed and it's not open, but it's clenched very tight. And you can see that stress go into an open mouth or a closed mouth. You can see a relaxed mouth be open or closed. But in her case, you can see it's closed very tightly. And each individual whisker in her muzzle are puffed up and visible. And you can be sure that her hackles on the back of her neck are also standing up. So this is all a symptom that she is going to move forward. She's going to move towards engagement should she have a reaction. I would expect that vocalizations will be higher pitched, will be louder, will be more frequent in a dog who's going to be more forward or proactive with their behavior. And I would expect that there will be more lunging and moving towards that stressor or that trigger. Now, with a backward or more defensive response, we have Falco here. Now, Falco is a little bit conflicted, so there may be some other things that you see. You know, he's got his ears are definitely pricked forward. But overall, this is a dog who would prefer to choose in this moment to move away, to flee, to avoid. So you see he's got very hunched posture. He's deliberately making himself appear smaller than he is. His brow is furrowed, just like Mouse's are, and his mouth is tightly closed, but all of his weight is shifted dramatically backwards. He's very ready to make a quick retreat. So in a defensive response or a backwards response, I would expect that body language move towards the back, be prepared to flee. If they vocalize, I would anticipate more low growls. I would anticipate more quiet barks or huffs. And their behavior, I might see more of those early appeasement signs. I might see a leg lifted. I might see sniffing, inappropriate sniffing or inappropriate drinking, or, you know, behaviors that are out of place. And then something important to keep in mind, and something I point out with Falco here, who is a little conflicted and does have some forward signs of aggression or forward signs of fear or stress, is that not every dog is going to embody a backwards response or a defensive response or an offensive response 100% of the time. They will shift back and forth, and there are some situations that may provoke a dog with behavioral challenges to be more proactive, and there are some moments where they may choose a more defensive response. So this is not 100% one dog is going to be this way all of the time. And it's also worth noting that even though this is a dog who wants to move away, this dog is no less dangerous or no less concerning in this situation. And in fact, because they are looking for a way out, that can result in a bigger safety risk, because people are more likely to push forward with a dog who is shrinking back than they are to push forward with a dog who is ready to meet them in conflict, in confrontation. So I want to talk a little bit about the different factors that influence your dog's reaction and your dog's readiness to move up and down that ladder of aggression. So the first one is going to be stress. Stress has a huge impact on the intensity of behaviors, rapidity of scaling the ladder of aggression. And as I start this section of the chat, I want to make a really big point that there is no perfect separation of categories. Each of these categories will influence the other. And so if you notice me repeating myself, that is a lot why. So a couple things to keep in mind, and I have the notes here of eustress, de-stress, and chronic stress. So one thing that I want to emphasize a lot is that eustress is a form of stress. And what eustress means is good stress, happy stress. So each of these pictures of Fig, in all of them, there is a significant degree of stress. Some of it's good, some of it's maybe neutral, some of it may even be considered distress. In the first photo, in the top photo, she is in a lure coursing trial. She loves lure coursing. She gets to chase a bag around a big field. She gets to run at top speed, which she very rarely gets to do. She gets to engage in all her predatory instincts. But if we want to go back to that body language, if you can see how round her eyes are, how tight her face is, how high up her tail is, she is stressed in this photo. She's having the time of her life, but it is stress. In addition to that, there may be some background distress of she just waited in a line with a lot of barking dogs. She just had a lot of frustration that it wasn't her turn. There was a lot of commotion around. I think this was also the trail where the line kept breaking and I kept needing to hold her back while they fixed it. There's a lot of potential stress in this situation. So even though she's having a fantastic time, there is the potential for higher arousal, higher responses on the ladder of aggression if she were to experience a negative stimuli. Similarly, in that middle photo, nice calm day, right? And she's looking at me and it's beautiful and wonderful. And we are at a nosework trial. And a nosework trial, she's looking for scent in a given environment. It's a fairly low key activity. It's one she really enjoys. This is the moment that she located the odor and she's telling me about it. All good stuff, right? All low stress. However, she's crated for a significant portion of the day in the car. You can see that the weather is not ideal, maybe. So, for a dog who doesn't love getting wet, it's not maybe the best day. And in addition, her owner is stressed because I have never been to a trial and not experienced some amount of stress. So there's a whole lot of things that are affecting that environment. And then that bottom photo, you see her right in the middle of her two German Shepherd friends. And they look beautiful and happy and wonderful. And they just completed a nice long 2-hour hike, predominantly off leash, running around, gearing up a whole bunch of eustress. But in addition to that, there is tension here. There's tension with the humans who are taking the picture. And there may be some tension between the two girls on either side of her, because both of these girls are litter mates who have always been somewhat aggressive with each other. And both, as they've reached maturity, have developed some same-sex aggression. So we are being very careful and a little bit stressed as we're taking the picture. And Fig is possibly experiencing some stress signals from either side of her, as Ari and Al need to sit very close to these other females, two of whom they really don't particularly like, in order to take the photo. Now, they were having a great time. They weren't showing any big signs of stress, or else we wouldn't have pushed them into a photo. But these are all things that absolutely can be factoring or weighing in order to set that up. So absolutely some stress there. And then the last thing I want to kind of continue to take into account is chronic stress. I mentioned before, our dogs are asked to exist in an environment that is generally not set up for them. We have a whole bunch of human rules. They go on walks on leash. They experience a lot of stress. And if those stressors are particularly difficult for your dog, they may be living in a state of chronic stress. There is stress in the background of their environment that makes things very difficult for them. And then I want to talk about comfort. So similar to stress, comfort, level of comfort causes stress or lack thereof. I want to think about your dog's health and the pain that they may be in. So dogs who have recently experienced a medical emergency may have some lingering pain, may have some discomfort, may also have the memory or expectation of that discomfort. They may also be just in pain from a tweak of a muscle, or they slept wrong, or they could have some chronic pain. My 13-year-old absolutely has some arthritis that factors into her degree of, excitement to do things and participate with other dogs. You also can think about their environmental comfort. And what I mean by that is both kind of how secure they feel in novel spaces, which we'll get to in a moment, but also just how they're reacting to the current environment. Is it raining? Is it snowing? Is it cold? Is it hot? Are they on pavement or grass or carpet? What is their level of comfort in the environment they're in? Because if we're in an environment where we don't feel as physically comfortable, we are going to be more prone to bigger reactions, more intense reactions more quickly. And then we get to feelings of safety and security. What number of triggers are there in the environment? Is there social pressure from other dogs or from other humans, or is there social reassurance? There's lots of dogs, including the little Samoyed at the bottom of this page, who are buoyed by the presence of other dogs. If other dogs are in a space, they are automatically feeling more secure and less fearful than they would be if they were there by themselves. There's also familiarity and novelty. Familiar spaces are usually more comfortable for a dog than novel spaces, and the degree of which depends entirely on that individual dog. And then we have the history of behaviors. So history of how those behaviors on the ladder of aggression are responded to. So one of them is learning history. So when I say punishment, I'm not saying it to demonize using tools or using punishment in your training. That's not what I'm looking to do here. But an expectation of punishment, for example, if your dog has been punished, and remember they define punishment, so a sharp no might constitute punishment for them. If they've been punished for a growl, they may skip a growl in the ladder of aggression. Also, a lack of clarity in their training. Not understanding what's expected of them may cause them more confusion and thus more stress and thus quicker escalation up that ladder. The other piece of it is if they have given warning signs before, and this usually happens with those early warning signs, looking away, licking their lips, trying to move away. If those signs have been ignored, usually with the best of intentions, usually not having seen those signs at all, because we are silly creatures who do not listen to our body language very well at all. And we don't always understand what these canine signals are giving to us. And so a history of those signs being ignored or bypassed can also cause a dog to move more quickly up the ladder of aggression. And then lastly, the degree of choice that they are expecting to be given. If they have been giving these signals in the past, and this falls into being heated or ignored, but if they have been given a choice to engage or disengage with certain tasks, they are less likely to react more intensely when those tasks are presented because they have an expectation of choice. So going out of their personal history, you also want to look at their overall history, their genetics. And I have stars next to this one because I think one of the most damaging concepts out there for dog owners, especially dog owners who have challenging dogs, is the concept that it is all in how you raise them. And there is so much that is outside of our control and outside of our doing that is driven by their past experiences and their ancestors' past experiences and their breed's past experiences that all affects how quickly they move up the ladder of aggression, how they react, whether they react more defensively or offensively, what their tendencies are going to be. There is so much that is decided long before they are ever born. So one of those things I want to talk about is breed tendencies. What was your dog initially bred for, and how does that translate to the life that they're currently living in? What they're bred for is going to affect what they're likely to react to, what they're likely to be sensitive to. A hound dog with generations upon generations of hunting in packs is going to have a very sensitive nose. A shepherd who is expected to keep an eye on an entire herd of sheep as they move from one pasture to another is going to be very, very hyper aware of changes in their environment. And in an environment that changes a lot, that can be very challenging for them. More close to your individual dog, you want to also take into account the temperament of the parents. This is no shade to rescue dogs. This is no shade to bred dogs. But the temperament of the parents specifically is going to impact the temperament of their offspring. How do those temperaments match? Were they mismatched? Was the parent dog particularly hypervigilant or particularly prone to impulsive behavior. Um, what thought was given to the temperament of those two dogs when they were put together? And in terms of their prenatal and neonatal experiences, how stressed was the mother, and what did that do to the puppy's cortisol levels in the womb? What did it do to their early neonatal experiences? And I'm going to lump the socialization period in here too, because while very many of us have our dogs as puppies, get our puppies home at 8 weeks old, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how they're being raised, a lot of that socialization period is happening well before 8 weeks. And so that also matters what the breeder was doing, what the parent of the dog was doing, how they were being brought up, and were they being under socialized? Were they being poorly socialized? Did they just have a really tough experience during that very sensitive period? And all of those are factored into their genetics and epigenetics that we cannot change once we have an adult dog who's showing these behavior issues. And then finally, lest you think that there's no change available to us, we come to training. So training is also going to impact how quickly they scale the ladder of aggression, what the intensity of their behaviors are going to be, and what behaviors they choose. Some of this is about management and prevention of the rehearsal of behaviors. So antecedent arrangement is all about setting up the environment for success. Remember that all of these behaviors on that ladder of aggression, all the problem behaviors you're seeing from your dog serve a purpose. If they continue to serve that purpose, if they get the scary thing to move away, if they get themselves in a more secure space, then they've served their purpose. Um, so you'll see those behaviors repeat because they have served their purpose. They have successfully repulsed whatever they're worried about. They have successfully ended the behavior they didn't like. So setting up the environment to show them that there are other ways to achieve the goals of getting rid of things that they don't like or repulsing scary things will create better habits and more socially appropriate habits in the future. Confidence building of the dog in general, outside of those stressful environments, as well as teaching true coping mechanisms and habits that can be employed during times of stress. All of these things will come together to affect, now in a positive way, will affect how quickly your dog moves up the ladder of aggression and what behaviors they tend to reach for. So next, I want to kind of talk a little bit about that scale of fear, anxiety, and stress. And the scale I'm going to be using is pulled directly from Fear Free Certification's website that talks about the different levels of canine fear, anxiety, and stress in those same stoplight colors. So first you have your green of low fear, anxiety, and stress. And I refer to this is your training time. If your dog is entirely relaxed, if they're perked, a little bit interested, maybe a little anxious, this is a good time to work on new skills. This is the time to introduce behaviors. This is the time to do enrichment behaviors and decompression skills, and all of that is when your dog is at a very low level of stress. As that stress starts to increase, if they're alert, excited, anxious, if they're showing kind of little signs like the lip licking, avoiding eye contact, lifting their paw, maybe starting to pant or dilating pupils, but they're generally, their whole body is still fairly relaxed, that's when you want to pull out their known skills, the things that they know how to do, that are easy for them to reach for, that aren't super challenging for them, because they're not going to have the mental acuity to practice new skills right now, but they can do something that they've spent a lot of time and muscle memory building. So when you want to train is when you are in the green. As you leave the green, our goal primarily is to get back to the green. So as you move to yellow and those moderate signs of stress, your first job is to manage the environment. This is when you are approaching your dog's threshold. And by threshold, I mean the point at which, and this point can shift, the point at which they are going to start having those negative reactions, those signs of stress where their ears go back, their tail goes down, their brow gets furrowed. Maybe you see a little bit of piloerection, which is the hackles going up. They may even start refusing food, or they might start taking food really, really hard. Um, when they start to get sticky is when you want to manage the situation. We're going to talk about different ways to manage the situation, but very often it means some form of distance or retreat from whatever that stressor is. After you manage the behavior, after you manage their situation, their environment, then you're going to check in with them. And there are a number of different check-in behaviors. I tend to like just, can you offer me eye contact as my check-in behavior? And you're going to also check in with their body language and looking, are they back in those green scale of body language? Maybe they're still showing some mild or subtle, or the same word combined, signs of stress. Maybe they just look a little bit anxious. But if they're back in the green, then you can go ahead and train. And then you're going back to, depending on how anxious they seem, you might go back to either known or new skills. But until you're there, while you're still in that yellow, sticky, not super attentive, not super able to connect space, you're going to work on managing their environment rather than training the dog, because you're getting them close to a point where they're really, really struggling. Now, this is kind of an ideal little cycle to end up in. And I think one of the challenges of training behaviorally challenging dogs is that we get very, very stuck in, well, we want to do training. So we want to practice known skills and we want to introduce new skills. And that's everything we want to do. However, if you never push your dog, if you never push yourself into those situations where you're starting to see some moderate signs of stress, then you're never starting to test their coping mechanisms and start building their coping mechanisms so they can handle more challenging environments while staying at a green level. This particular slide, this cycle of managing, checking in, and training your dog, managing, checking in, and training your dog is so important for building resilience, for building perseverance, for your dog to be able to handle more situations at a green level of stress. Super, super important. And then we get into the really hard stuff. If they hit red, if they redline, then they're in severe fear, anxiety, and stress. This is not a state where your dog can learn. You are not training here. Ideally, your goal is to prevent this from happening. You want to manage the environment. You want to offer opportunities for decompression and enrichment. You want to work behaviors in calm enough situations where your dog never reaches these points of reaction, these points of aggression or stress or anxiety, whether it's offensive or defensive. But mistakes happen. So if, you ended up on these levels in this red space where your dog cannot handle the situation that they're in, you're going to manage the situation. So just like if it was yellow, you are going to get them out of that situation, bring them down from that level of stress, and then you will probably want to switch to decompression. You will probably want to move out of a training realm and move into helping your dog recover from that stress. And when I say that, that doesn't necessarily mean, depending on your dog's resilience, depending on the time they've spent training, that doesn't necessarily mean, oh, the training session is fully over, you have to pack up, go home, come back another day. But it might mean that you want to take a break and offer a decompression activity in order to give your dog a moment. And that moment might be 30 seconds. That moment might be 5 minutes. That moment might be a day or a week, depending on what the situation was. But you're going to give them that moment before you ask them to go back in to training. And once they've had the chance to decompress, that's when you can check in with them. That's when you can determine whether or not you still need to manage or if you're ready to train. And once they're back in green, that's when you can go to training. So we want to prevent any severe reactions, but when they happen, if they happen, you're going to manage and then decompress. You are not trying to train in this situation. So let's talk about the different ways that we can move towards resolving behavior issues. First and foremost is management. So when I say management, I mean a whole lot of different things. And I've been saying it a whole lot. So you have barriers and routines that are in place to prevent the rehearsal of problematic behaviors and ideally prevent, got that prevention, ideally prevent the stressful situation from arising or prevent it from escalating past your dog's ability to cope. So that might include gates, barriers, window film, crates, muzzles once they've been trained to wear a muzzle, prepared chew toys or prepared licky mats, white noise in the room they're in, covers on crates, separation or distance from other dogs or from their challenges, long lines that keep them separated from other dogs and their challenges, but give your dog the freedom of movement. So in these images, you can see Fig and Mouse as they were starting to work on integration. They are currently able, in this picture, they're able to exist in the same space. They're able to give me their attention. They're able to stay in a nice, I would say, perked and interested, maybe a little anxious, but perked and interested state of stress. But they're able to function on either side of a barrier, but that barrier between them is helping me manage the environment so they aren't able to escalate up that ladder. Mouse can be dog aggressive depending on the dog. She is absolutely dog selective. And it was a nice long 9-month process getting her and Fig acclimated to each other and getting them integrated into the household together. The second image you see is also my good Mouse. She is here in a muzzle at a distance from several other dogs. And I would say that is a nice fear anxiety scale level of 0. She is perfectly relaxed. She is rolling on her back in the grass, having a wild time. And there are multiple dogs in the background. The one you can mostly see is the big white fluffy Samoyed. But further in, there's also, I think, 2 shepherds further back in the photo, along with a person, but at a pretty significant distance. And this was a break that we were taking in the midst of one of her first play sessions as a 9 or 10-year-old dog, one of her first play sessions. And we were intentionally taking breaks to manage that stress, to give her some distance and to give her some time to come down from any stress that being around these other dogs was causing. And then lastly, you have a Topple and a Kong that are prepared in a fridge, ready to go for potentially stressful situations in the future. And then I want to get into decompression, which Topples and Kongs can help with. So decompression is a form of management, but also recovery. And decompression can include activities and behaviors that reduce stress and allow adrenaline and cortisol levels to regulate. And basically, this helps to prevent chronic trigger stacking. So when I say chronic trigger stacking refers to the number of different stressors your dog is asked to contend with in their everyday life. So if your dog goes for a neighborhood walk every morning and they are dog reactive, but they manage to pass the neighbor's Yorkie and another doodle and a Rottweiler all without reacting, but as they get back to the house, they pass a little beagle and they lose their minds. All of the stress of passing 4 dogs is being released onto this poor unsuspecting beagle. That's trigger stacking. Very often, dogs who are dealing with behavior challenges are not able to truly get away from triggers that are kind of in the background still affecting their stress level. And that's where we talked about that chronic stress. Adrenaline passes through the body very quickly, but cortisol doesn't. Cortisol lingers for several days. So the stress of something 2-3 days ago can be impacting your dog's reaction in the moment. So giving them the opportunity to lick or chew, giving them the opportunity to have independent or one-on-one time with their people. You see Mouse relaxing with me on a hammock. Up at the top, you have Daisy, one of my boarders, enjoying a Topple. And then you have Bailey, who has since passed, but enjoying a wonderful decompression hike. She is my poster child for enjoying the wilderness. Going on decompression hikes, which are hikes that are specifically geared towards being out either off leash or on a long line, having the dog kind of be able to direct where they want to go, sniff what they want to sniff in an environment where they are very unlikely to run into any triggers, or they're very likely to be at a significant distance from those triggers. So being able to just kind of get out in nature and relax and come down from the stress of their everyday. Also relevant to the Topples and Kongs of the world is enrichment. But enrichment doesn't stop at food puzzles. It's way, way, way more than that. And it actually encompasses so much of what is most important for dogs, all dogs, but especially dogs with behavioral challenges. So enrichment activities are activities that both meet your dog's species typical needs, but also empower them to independently problem solve and explore their environment in a way that encourages security and builds confidence. So these are activities that are very typical, that are things that dogs gravitate towards, but really encourage them to explore their environment, to figure things out, um, to really, kind of be their fullest version of themselves, get to enjoy things. So that can be, training in general, that mental stimulation, that social engagement with you is bonding and it's fun. And that's one of the reasons that I always encourage my behavioral clients to do fun, silly classes with their dog. Take the tricks class, take a pups parkour class. Yes, maybe it's not, maybe they're not behaviors that you specifically are going to work on for your reactivity, for your resource starting. But what they can do is they foster a better relationship, which makes spending time together more enjoyable. They relieve stress because working on these behaviors, working on the challenges is stressful inherently for you and for your dog. But they also provide mental stimulation in a low stress way. They're fun, they're bonding, they're great for your relationship. So doing training, letting your dog sniff or dig appropriately, explore new spaces, go swimming, stretch their body, run around, forage for food. I am a big fan of tossing kibble out in the yard for your dog to find for their dinner. And even sensory stimulation. You have little coda at the bottom there, checking out different flowers, and Finley in the middle, climbing a tree and being in the river, spending time with his buddy Ryan. All of these things can impact your dog's quality of life, but also it has to do with them leading the way, and them choosing their activity and choosing what they find interesting, fulfilling, and enriching. So all of that becomes incredibly important when you're dealing with a dog with behavior challenges, because this is going to help not only give them a more stable baseline of behavior, but it's also going to help build their confidence so they're more capable of handling stressors. The next thing I want to focus on is medical. And this is the one slide where none of the pictures relate to the point that I'm making, other than every single being in these pictures, including the human, is on some form of medical intervention. So partnering with a vet is incredibly important. I think that having a good relationship with your vet is one of the best things you can do for your dog. Even if your dog is entirely like picture perfect, everything is so normal, nothing is difficult. But when you have a difficult dog, partnering with your vet can make such a huge impact on your dog's behavior. And that's whether or not medical intervention is needed specifically for the behavior or not. Vets can help you assess for pain or discomfort or disease, things that, going back to their comfort, things that are going to impact their level of stress, things that are going to impact the intensity and rapidity at which they go up the ladder of aggression. They're going to be able to help you set your dog up for success, set the stage so your dog is in a comfortable mindset before they start training. In addition, those behavior meds can also make a huge difference in your dog's care. If your vet feels that behavior meds are called for in your particular situation, remember that they are there to help bring your dog to a baseline, give your dog the ability to process the behaviors and the training that you're looking for them to process so they can build those coping skills. Medical intervention is not in lieu of training. It is intended to go hand in hand with training where it is indicated. So there is nothing shameful about medical intervention. It's a intrinsic piece of the battle to have your vet partner with you in your behavioral journey. So that's my soapbox on medical. And like I said, all of these dogs have had medical intervention. I've had medical intervention. I suppose the little Chihuahua has not. unless you count, he got pretty angry one time when he had a stomach potential obstruction, and he got anti-nausea medication and pain meds for that, and he was a lot easier to handle. So I will say even he has had some medical intervention that has affected his behavior. And tying into the medical, teaching cooperative care, I think, is another important, almost vital part of addressing behavioral issues and resolving behavioral issues. Absolutely, it can be part and parcel of an enrichment plan. It's mental stimulation. It's helping build their safety and security. It is providing bonding time and social time with you. It's giving them agency and choice in their behaviors. All of that factors into all enrichment activities. But it definitely deserves its own slide here, because ensuring that your dog feels comfortable and in control of their husbandry and handling, that builds confidence, that contributes to a safe environment for us, a secure environment for your dog. So cooperative care essentially is teaching your dog certain behaviors that allow them to agree to or consent to the handling or the husbandry, the grooming, the vet care, whatever's coming next. It basically gives them a way to say yes or no. And some of those ways are being in a middle. Some of those ways are, very simply being able to eat. You can use a chin rest. You can use a specific mat. But cooperative care can be used to build choice and trust in training for muzzle wearing, in training for any vet procedures, up to and including injections, up to and including handling exams, positions for um, rehab exercises, or x-ray positioning. It can help with at-home stuff like nails and brushing and grooming, as well as just general handling and comfort being touched. Again, we are not always the most well-versed beings as humans in body language, and our dogs are experts. So giving them a very clear body language cue that they can then cue us about their comfort level can help make that communication so much more smooth and give them some power and some control in their ability to communicate their discomfort or their comfort level. And then last but not least, their coping skills. And this is the part that we most likely think of when we think of a behavioral modification plan. And it's absolutely an important part, but it's only part of a behavioral health protocol. So this is teaching your dog behaviors, patterns that allow them to better cope with their triggers. And that's going to widen their world, and it's going to widen your world and improve their and your quality of life. So some of the things that I rest on for this is teaching them to cope with beings nearby while they are doing their triggering events. So whether that's resource guarding, people being able to be in the room while they're eating, is a very useful skill. If they are dog reactive or human reactive, being able to be in the presence of others, maybe just being neutral. I often recommend not seeking out direct interaction unless it's something that, with vet care or something like that, that you really need that direct interaction. So part of developing coping skills is really being able to identify what behaviors you as the human want in the situations you're training for, and having clear goals that you're working towards. So then you can pass that along and be clear with your dog. What am I asking you to cope with? What am I asking you to find comfort with? So for me, that is being neutral around other dogs. You can see Mouse in the top picture. She is hiking off leash with some other dogs that she's learned to be comfortable with. We have some client dogs who are also practicing the same behaviors on a much more populated path. So them being able to pass strange dogs. If you're living in a city or a more populated area, you may need your dog to be able to pass very close to other dogs or accept another dog sniffing them without a strong reaction. And at the bottom is Falco, who did need to learn to get along with certain people and needed a protocol to be introduced to those people so he could have pet sitting, so he could have vet care. So being able to identify what it is you're training for and what your not even end goal is, but what your next goal is, and being able to work towards that is incredibly important, and not only work towards that in terms of avoiding it or ignoring it, but being able to be fully aware of the environment that they're in without being tricked, without being coerced, be fully aware and accepting of the environment they're in at a low fear, anxiety, and stress level. So that's what we're looking at when we're looking at overall behavior challenges and how the different paths and how we go about looking to resolve them. I really, really hope you got a lot out of this introduction to behavior challenges. I'm super happy to answer questions if you want to send them by email to liz@likemagicdogtraining.com, or you can send them to me by social media, either on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. But definitely reach out if you're having behavioral challenges with your dog. I am super happy to help. It is one of my favorite things to work on, is seeing dogs succeed in these arenas. So the next chat is going to be enrichment made easy. So I talked a little bit about enrichment today. I'm going to talk a lot about enrichment on the 18th at 6 o'clock. And then down at the bottom there, you see you have my my email, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok handles and connections. If you are interested in getting started with your dog's own behavioral training, I really encourage you to check out Drama Class. That's our online self-led course that is all about reactivity and all about working through and building, particularly building those coping skills to resolve reactivity. But also reach out for a session 0. Those are my initial behavior consultations where we'll talk through in depth your situation, your training goals, your lifestyle, and what you need from your dog and what you're currently seeing. We'll introduce a few behaviors and a few management techniques to make your life easier today. And then moving forward can move into a training program or package that best fits your lifestyle, your training needs, your budget, your situation, and preferences and learning style, and can move forward having a better quality of life and better bond with your dog. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.